Well, hello everyone, and welcome in once again to a evening of live entertainment and informative information exposing the Jehovah's Witness organization, i.e. Watchtower. Well, we got the program coming up here next. It's called Watchtower Insider. Barbara Anderson tells all, and she has a very special guest on tonight, and we're looking so forward to it. Scott Homan. Well, he has been, the producer, the director. He's written most of the Jehovah's Underground documentary, and you folks have seen it. It's wonderful. It's getting a lot of good reviews. So we're so glad that Barbara's going to have Scott on her program tonight. And I want to just mention, too, now, at the end of the program, say about Barbara's program normally gets over about 8, but about 20 minutes before 8, we'll open up the lines. And what we'll do is if you want to come on and talk, you can I'll give you a telephone number. It'll be on YouTube. Or if you want to come on StreamYard, you can actually hit the link you'll see on the YouTube. If you're watching it on YouTube, hit the link on YouTube. That'll bring you backstage. Now, if you don't want to go on video, don't worry. It'll give the option to go on or not. You can just talk to Barbara and Scott if you have some comments you'd like to make. So we'll give you a little more instructions as we get into that. But anyways, let's bring Barbara on right now. And we're so glad to see Barbara every other Saturday night here on the Six Screens. Hello, Barbara.
Howdy, Rick.
So there you are, always looking good and ready to roll, I have to say. We have
full of information tonight.
Well, we have 14 different programs here on the Six Screens Telenetwork.
Oh.
But I have to tell you, you do your homework. You get an A all around. I'm telling you, Barbara, you do really good.
That's wonderful.
Well, you really do. So let's bring on Scott. Now, he's quite the man. We've had him on here before. He's a talented young man, and how good it is to have him. So you work with Scott. I'm here if you need me. Now, Scott, also, if you just give me the timestamps for the portions of the documentary you want to show, I'll be glad to do that.
Oh, wow. Thanks. I didn't actually know we could do that. That's great.
Oh, yeah. If you want, I've got it up so I can actually, if you know whereabouts you'd like to at least have it be shown on YouTube and Facebook, let me know. I'll put it up. Okay. And you'll see it. Okay. Thank you. All right.
Well, hello, Scott. Last time I saw you, it was 6 months ago tomorrow.
Wow.
And you were
Time
here.
flies. Time really flies. Thanks for having me on then. That was really important, actually, because we were doing the Kickstarter to launch the film. And now the film is out publicly all over the world. So that's the one message I wanted to tell everybody is we did it. We got it out there.
That's it. We're finished.
Yeah. End of the story.
You told it all. I don't have anything else to say.
No. There's so much more to say, actually.
You were here for money, I want everybody to know that. You came last time for money, M-O-N-E-Y, and you got it, didn't you?
Yes, we did. In fact, getting on shows like yours and getting the word out was really the thing that motivated people to support the project when it mattered. And now we've gone and used that money to get the film out in wide release. And so now I'm not here to ask for money. I'm here to just encourage people to go watch this thing that was supported by over 520 former Jehovah's Witnesses through crowdfunding. So this is a community project, and I want everyone to go now see it because people believed in it enough to open their wallets. And we want to make sure that we do right by everybody and make sure that they all have access to it.
Well, it was interesting when we had you here before. We learned a lot. I never knew there was such a thing as a Kickstarter campaign. I didn't know about your Witness Underground film. You were doing a lot of things in secret.
Yeah. And we can get into why. We needed to do it that way. But yeah.
Primarily, it was because it was a very important discussion. What is this Witness Underground all about? I mean, just don't give me a synopsis. It was about what awful procedure and the Watchtower. What was
the key issue that we wanted to put out into the world is about shunning, the dark side of the shunning policy. and how it negatively affects society in general, but especially the members, of course, who are the being attacked through this type of emotional manipulation. And I feel like we demonstrate it in a way, and a lot of other films have also attempted to demonstrate and show shunning, and they all do take a different angle, but we want to show more than just that. So we focus on more of a life after angle, like to show the survival and then the moving on and then the looking forward and embracing the life of freedom. So we can get into some more of that detail, but essentially the film's about artists escaping this particular faith group. I like to say artists escaping a cult, but that's a little bit salacious.
So the film's message is about shunning, and it's about the entertainment industry, right?
Yeah, and kind of. So we kind of get into how this group of musicians in the religion, and musicians and filmmakers and writers and painters all kind of found each other inside the religion. But it was that act of creation, act of self-expression that forged the path of many of them actually free thinking and then eventually getting out. And what does that path out of faith look like and in finding self-determination? And everyone who's listening here probably has taken that path and taken it somewhere, and that everyone has a different path. And so we wanted to show the real path that some of these people took and demonstrate our ex-Jehovah's Witness experience in film in a way that was something we can be proud of.
How can people see it?
Great question. So there's a few ways, and especially this is good for the American market. And so this whole world of professional film release is very complicated. And so we found a path, and one of the common streaming services that people have access to is Tubi. That's the best way to watch it. It's free.
Oh, Tubi? I said Tubby.
Tubby TV.
That was Tubi.
All those out there who want to watch Tubby TV. No, Tubi TV. Tubi TV has like 1% of the world's market share for streaming. So it's actually a huge app. It's easy to use, and it has ads. So that's how it supports the filmmaking. It's free to watch for everyone who where it's region blocked. So I believe it's most of North America, so most of the North American countries. I'm not sure about Mexico, but where I've been living this year in Panama and Costa Rica, it worked. So probably most of North America it works. Mm-hmm. I think Canada, it doesn't. Anyway, there's other ways. So there's Amazon, you can rent it there. And then, of course, for a small fee, there's the YouTube membership, Patreon, Vimeo, and it's all on the witnessunderground.com website. So everywhere that you can watch it for free and or rent it is available there. So anyone in the world can watch it now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you get these companies to pick this up to show it? What do they do? They have to view it, right? And
yes.
then they say,
it's
actually, this I don't like, we're not going to take it. Or they say, oh, I didn't know that.
It's actually an incredibly complicated process. And generally it's called distribution. And this is an industry that's been going on for almost 100 years now. How do you get a movie into wide distribution? Before it was VHS or theaters, and then VHS, and then DVDs. And now we have streaming. So part of the selection process is actually film festivals. So it's been my life's dream since I was a teenager to make a documentary and also go through the film festival process. Even though I'd never even been to one, this film took me to, it was an official selection to 11 film festivals, and it won an award at a horror film fest called Genre Blast.
Horror.
Yeah. So of all the prestigious awards that are out there, it's not exactly a prestigious one, but it's actually something I'm very proud of, that a horror film festival is like, ooh, that's perfect for our festival. And then that whole thing is actually quite interesting, because to get selected at a film festival, they get hundreds to thousands of submissions, and to be selected, an official selection is in the top 5% usually. Let's say 1 to 10% of submissions. So it's already a huge selection process just to get into, be able to show it in a theater in front of a population or an audience. And then once you have that, then you can go to a distribution place and say, hey, we were honored by all of these festivals with an official selection or an award, additionally an award. Can you guys take a look at this film? And then there's lots of middlemen and different people to navigate. And then there's different things that are called, there's different apps now and programs where basically you submit it to them, and they're like, hey, check, they have relationships with 50 to hundreds of different streaming services, and they then go to try to sell your movie, and then they take a 20% cut. So there's this whole business side, and if that's interesting to you, I'm happy to talk to anyone about how that works, because I figured it out, and it took me 3 years to figure it out. And it took the support of this community that's listening to help us financially to figure that out. So thank you to everyone here who's listening, who supported that. And if you want to make a movie, hit me up. I would like to help you do that.
Oh, that's wonderful. They're all going to make a mad dash for their telephone to call you or their your email.
Yeah, write your questions and ask Barbara at the end, and I'll help field those questions.
I just thought about this while you were talking. I'm intensely learning all of this from you. I'm really into this. And, shunning is really a horror.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you won at the horror festival. So
for shunning.
It's a
shunning.
Horror. Shunning is a horror when it happens to you or me or whatever.
Yes.
So,
it's an act of abuse. And to just paint it in the picture of greater society, we have prisons, and the absolute worst prisoners in the prison cell or in the prison itself get put into solitary confinement, which is what shunning is, like a virtual version of. They get put into a cage or a box away from everyone else for weeks, and then until the point that they have a psychological break often. And that is the actual punishment, is to have that psychological break. So Jehovah's Witnesses are actually doing the worst punishment that humans have devised, besides physical torture, I guess, psychological torture. Mm-hmm. And for me, I know you are a big advocate for human rights. Mm-hmm. That is something that the general world doesn't understand. I mean, obviously we do this to our prisoners, so we know about it, but the fact that it's happening in your own neighborhood, in basically every country on the planet by Jehovah's Witnesses, it's not healthy. And people should know that it exists, and that this is one of the dangers that you put your family in if you take their literature, if you go to their religious services. Well,
they don't usually tell you about it before.
Yeah, it's a secret.
Yeah. And why'd you get into this? What is your personal motivation for? I mean, I got a good idea what you're going to say.
Oh yeah. Do you want to give it a try?
Has a little bit different motivation. So
that's true. One of them was that Jehovah's Witnesses, my dad joined the religion, so we were the new family in the congregation, and this is in Wisconsin, and so my mom didn't really take to it. There's still she didn't ever get baptized. My dad went in and he tried to take it seriously, but I had a very light experience in compared to most Jehovah's Witnesses born-ins or people that took it really seriously. We had a lot of leniency and a lot of exposure to different kinds of people and thoughts and religious ideas and education. So that's not the typical thing. But one thing I learned is that Jehovah's Witnesses don't really understand what they're doing, and they don't even know what the other Jehovah's Witnesses believe, because if you ever speak up about your actual beliefs, then you get otherized, and then there's this distance. The general public have no idea that any of this is happening, which I kind of mentioned already.
That's right.
And then ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, I kind of had I guess you could say I was physically in, mentally out for most of my time related to this religion, because I was sort of always questioning a lot of it. Some of it I definitely believed or thought was valid. But when I was looking at telling the shunning story, because I've been shunned, that's the real motivation, is I've been shunned, so I have this thing to tell. Mm-hmm. But through that research of, what's the ex-Jehovah's Witness experience that we all share? And so I looked on the internet, and surprise, surprise, there's hundreds of thousands of us. In one group, just Reddit alone has 100,000 ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. And what's common among all of us is that we're sort of stuck in some parts of our lives. And I think that this film, one of the angles, besides demonstrating shunning in a way that would be surprising, was to also show people that there's another layer. Like, you can move beyond this thing and go create the life that you want. And one of those elements is I'm so proud of my experience of leaving that religion, and for a while I thought that was the most interesting thing I would ever achieve in my life, is having just stopped deciding to go to this religion on a weekly basis. But yeah, there's so much I want to sort of show that there's a next stage. There's the next, like, look forward in life instead of looking back all the time towards this thing that affected us in a big, deep way. There's if you pursue your dreams, if you follow your passions, if you pursue your curiosities, something incredible can happen. And it can be on this topic. Obviously, I went and made a film on it. Now I have a YouTube channel where I basically talk about this religion every single week. And to different varying levels of mental health. I would like to do other things too. This is just one of those things I felt like I needed to do. I needed to do this for my own self-expression. I needed to do it for my own mental traumas and get through some of those stuff to focus on them and work through them. And I don't recommend necessarily going and making a documentary to work on yourself, but it did help. It did help me get through some of that stuff.
Well, when we watch Witness Underground, is there music? Do we get to hear the talent of some of these people that were shunned?
Absolutely. And that's the unique thing that the film demonstrates. In addition, okay, we demonstrate shunning. I use that word for shunning, but we show as much as we can with archival footage the actual lived Jehovah's Witness experience through artists. So there was something like, I think it's 12 highly produced albums that we feature in the film with live performances and with their actual soundtracked music. The soundtrack is like 2.5 hours long. It's of Jehovah's Witness music, but it's like indie rock and shoegaze and like psychedelic rock and all this kind of like 90s music.
Something for everybody.
A little bit for everybody. And that's something that people keep on saying as reaction to the movie now that it's out, is like, whoa, like they were incredibly talented. And so if you have that realization, like these aren't just this isn't just your average person. They're like incredibly talented artists. And then when they have their transition and they start really finding their voice and getting rid of all the limits that the religion put on them, then they become these incredible kind of rock stars in their city. And they make exit albums. Like this is an album that encompasses their exiting experience, exiting the religion. Okay.
Well, look at that.
That at last Jehovah's justice has been served. Now, how will Jehovah dispose of all these bodies of those slain by him? Ezekiel 39, our God will thoroughly cleanse the land.
Yes, this is the intro. And hey, that's you in there writing and self-publishing the Watchtower magazine.
Were they doing this just for to be recorded? Or?
So yeah, I kind of arranged that. Thank you, Rick, for putting that on. You're producing in the background. I really appreciate that. Live production.
Yes.
By Rick Fearon. So yeah, that particular opening, we actually kind of bookend the film at the beginning and the beginning and end with the live performance of that group of musicians who actually have never played music together. 3 of them had, but the drummer never even heard those songs. And then there's another guitarist who's heavily featured in the film, but that group of people had never played any music together in their whole lives. And so they're not a band. They were just sort of representing this like moving on in a more fictional sense. But they're actually like really talented, and they did that without really any rehearsal. So I was really impressed by that. And they hadn't, even the people that had written those songs, there's 3 of the original members of a band called High TV that we heavily feature, especially in the second half of the movie, who were a real band, and they're maybe the positive arc after leaving the religion. And their music's amazing. I love them. And I've been using their music to soundtrack my YouTube channel's other series that's related to Witness Underground. It's a Witness Underground YouTube channel for years before this and after. Anyway, they hadn't played before that live performance that we captured for the movie for about 8 years, I think it was.
Really?
Yeah. So like the fact that they just like showed up and like rocked out to the level that was like, people are like, whoa, that's really cool. Can I buy that album? Is great.
Do the people that we just saw, do they show their talents full time? You know what I'm saying? I mean, do they work at? Do they have other jobs or?
Yeah, they do have other jobs, and we actually at the end of the movie we show what their career choices are, and what they're doing outside in their secular life, and it's actually an interesting thing because Jehovah's Witnesses, there's a few iconically famous people who were professional musicians and maintained that while maintaining their religious status in this religion. But for the most part, Jehovah's Witnesses couldn't really pursue fame or art as a profession. And there's reasons why, and they're mostly behavior control. And these musicians, for the most part, kept everything really insular in order to simply maintain basically a coping mechanism of self-expression within the religion, to keep their sanity while they were Jehovah's Witnesses. But part of that was like really learning that you can never pursue music and art as a profession. But some of them, still perform and play live a lot, but it's not like a money-making venture, unfortunately. However, that is to say that Ryan Sutter, probably the main story of the film, I could easily say that. He's the person who suffers the most in the movie. And he was involved he was the founder of the music community, him and his brothers. He has reopened the Nuclear Gopher Music Studio. That was originally a Jehovah's Witness music production studio where they recorded all the albums and where he was heavily involved. So he now has a working full studio with artists he's producing, and he's a studio musician at his own studio by the same name, Nuclear Gopher. So that if you're interested in this topic and you watch the movie and you're like, whoa, what's happening here? It's not just nostalgic. There's actually really cool active art being made by those same people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's been shown in how many countries?
So far, it's been a very DIY experience. I premiered it, like I said, at 11 film festivals. It had its debut in different regions and states in the States. And I then was living in South Mexico last year. So I put together with a Mexican film cinema group called Cine Móvil in Playa del Carmen. And we did a premiere there. It had 70 people, and it had a Colombian former Jehovah's Witness. And that was really a special conversation that happened with the Q&A after. So I had an international premiere in South Mexico with a really cool organization that I really like. And shout out to Ricardo Vag for putting that on. And I was thinking about doing one here in Panama where I'm at, but I probably won't. But I'll be premiering in New Zealand as part of the Decult live conference, in-person conference in Christchurch. It's happening I think it's around October 20th. So Anka Richter.
Shane, you got to get with Shane Meacham.
Yeah. Shane and I just had a chat last week, actually. And I know he was just on here with you a week or two ago. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so him and I are connecting. They're putting together an ex-Jehovah's Witness meetup for the film. That'll be our like South Pacific premiere at the Decult conference. So pay attention to that because there's going to be that'll be live streamed. And we're talking about putting together a digital version of it, like the Decult Digital Summit. And Anka Richter wrote a book called The Cult Trip. So when you had me on here, I was on a couple other shows. So she found out about our Kickstarter 6 months ago. And she, during the campaign, got in touch and said, hey, would you like to premiere that at Christchurch? And then we got to talking, and she's like, would you like to speak at the events? I said, yes. And that has turned into this whole thing. So I'm really excited to go to New Zealand and a lot of cool things are coming out of that. So
when did you start working on the actual film? I know that you had dreams of doing this.
Yeah.
But how long did it take from the beginning to where you are today? It's a success story that's just beginning, isn't it? Because your name is moving along from what I'm hearing. So,
oh wow, happy to hear
that. So how many years did it take to get to this point, or months did it take?
It was something like well, first of all, the deep desire to do something, to tell a big story in film about this topic, but I didn't really have the skills. So it's sort of, you could go back to when I first went to Vietnam with my camera. It was like, well, I want to develop the skills to be able to tell a story like this, to learn how to do it. So that was a couple of years of really trying hard to do other people's projects and working hard with camera, lights, sound, storytelling. But when it came to actually thinking about the shunning topic and how to develop it, it started with just interviewing people, which I know there's a lot of YouTubers in the ex-Jehovah's Witness space and in other different nefarious organizations and cults and sects. There's a lot of YouTube channels about those topics, and it's great. There should be more people interviewing and telling these stories like you're doing. You're inviting people on to tell these stories. And through that, I started doing interviews and creating a docuseries I called XJW Coming Out, using the language of the LGBTQ community, because it's really, there's a lot of parallels to the experience. So like we have the coming out experience of realizing that we don't follow the Watchtower anymore, or we don't agree with what their teachings are, or in a lot of people's cases, they don't believe that the Jehovah's Witness God exists, for example. And what is that coming out experience like? So I was kind of doing this more artistic visual experience with people in a sit-down interview, classic two-camera setup. So I was doing that in 2016, 17, and then in 18. And then I was like, you know what, I want to do something bigger. I think I could tell this bigger story with the music of these other artists that I knew. And then once we crowdfunded, so we crowdfunded, just like the Kickstarter, we did that back in 2018 in March. For the whole month of March. It's another app called Seed and Spark for crowdfunding for film. And 224 ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and a couple, people that knew about the topic and cared about it supported that financially. So thank you everyone who helped support the Seed and Spark back then. And it was sort of like doing that, it's like when you do a crowdfund, you're sort of like building the business and the marketing like 2-3 years in advance for a thing that's going to exist later. And through that rapid process of kind of developing the concept through that 1 month of intensity, just like we did with the Kickstarter with your help last 6 months ago, I made some connections and intuitive decisions that were sort of like, well, if I'm going to use the music of this group of people and I want to tell this story that they all lived and I lived, and I'm meeting all these people, actually, that's an incredibly powerful story. I should actually work with them first. And I hadn't even put those ideas together about what became the Witness Underground documentary until we had actually funded the production of it. And I was like, I want to work with people I know and trust, and that know and trust me, so that when they sit in front of the camera, we don't have to worry about trust. We can just have a really intense conversation because we know we share the same values, because we lived an entire years together being artists and playing, and basically we had our college experience together in a sense, in the Jehovah's Witness sense. We didn't, I was going to camera school and they were like rock stars in the Jehovah's Witness culture. Okay. And so we partied in the Jehovah's Witness way.
Yeah. So from the very beginning, after you were out of the organization, this was your dream to work behind the scenes. You don't play do you play an instrument?
I grew up as a musician. So that was another tie to the story, is I was a Jehovah's Witness musician. So there's a funny thing, and I guess it's important that you're starting to make a point that's important, which is we raised money and we made a movie, and it's not about me. I'm the guy who is always talking about it, but I feel like it's not even my story, because I had directed a movie about other people's story. And it was important to me to not be in it, which you might remember other crowdfunded films in this space that, it's hard to say this without hurting anyone's reputation, but basically I wanted to make sure I wasn't in it because I felt like that would harm the quality of the product. And now that it's out, I'm the spokesman for it, but please go interview those people that are in the movie. It's their story, right? I'm just the guy who wants to get this thing moving and in effect change in the world.
It takes somebody like you to get their story out. They don't know how to do this. Their occupation is entirely different. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's another angle of solidarity. I believe that this is an important issue for human rights, and I hope that it gets used for education, and I hope that it gets used for government to make laws and for people to understand the emotional impact of emotional abuse. And it can't just be one person shouting into the void on YouTube. It needs to be a collective of people coming together to push an idea out into the world in a bigger, more impressive way. And that was always a goal, is like, how do we get on something like Amazon and Tubi, some big channel? And we did it. But the goal was this huge goal, because how do you affect change? Well, getting an ex-Jehovah's Witness to watch a movie about ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, yeah, of course they're going to like it and subscribe to your channel, but it doesn't actually move the issue forward. It's like Jehovah's Witnesses and ex-Jehovah's Witnesses represent like 1 in 1,000 human beings in our country, in North America. And
that's interesting when you say that. I'm going to interrupt because why is it that often you find out that some celebrity has a witness background?
Yeah.
You've noticed that over the years.
Yeah.
Famous people, and they were raised as witnesses, and you go, oh my goodness. And but so it goes to show you that there's some real talent in the witness organization that's buried, and they have to get out of it before they can be show what that they're able or capable of doing in this world.
There's something in the art space that I really like. They say like limitations are like I don't know how to say, I'm not sure how to phrase this. Like desperation is the mother of invention is a general expression, but the idea of like, if you have limits, it actually can help your creativity. And I think there's really something that should be researched. So everyone out there who didn't get your education, go get an education and then figure out this problem. Why is it that the pressures put on you by a high control group cause people to think differently and then go create amazing art? Like, why is the king of pop? Why was he a Jehovah's Witness?
Yes,
right.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many people. I found a playlist on Reddit, on the XGW Reddit, that was POMO playlist, physically out, mentally out playlist is their title. And it came out like a year ago. This group of people put a Spotify playlist together. So it's like all these songs that helped people when they were in their religion transition to being out of their religion. And they were like powerful empowerment songs. And I wanted to make, because my whole channel is artists escaping Jehovah's Witnesses or artists escaping a cult. Now I've worked with so many filmmakers and authors and musicians who have left this religion and have done self-expression about their experience and what they wrote about. And they often have this like, I had to write a book, I had to write a memoir, I had to make an album, I had to make 3 albums about my exit, I had to create a movie about this. And they did, and they're so impressive. And now they're doing other stuff. So it's almost like this self-expression, processing trauma experience, but it had to come out of them. Like they couldn't survive if they didn't make this piece of art. And so I made this playlist called I called the XGW Artist playlist. So it's all former Jehovah's Witnesses, and it has Big E on there, and it has some Michael Jackson, and it has some Childish Gambino, but it also has people like Allison Nine, who's a new artist. She's amazing. And it has Ryan Sutter from our movie, and it has Sweet Candy Dream, I think they're called. There's all these amazing ex-Jehovah's Witness artists who are on there. Even the New Radicals was a former Jehovah's Witness from the 90s, like pop rock, indie rock guy. And there's so many. And I'm just like, oh my God, these are all sort of, everyone has these coming out albums. So I'm so excited about this topic. And I made a movie about it. And I want someone else to make a movie or help me make the next movie that puts all these other ex-Jehovah's Witness artists on the soundtrack. That's another future topic, future stuff we're going to do.
Well, you introduced it now, so now we expect you
now
to keep going on it. Right? The reaction of the non-witness community that looked at the documentary, what are some of the outstanding statements? Did people generally not know about shunning?
Yeah, that's something the point I was about to make before is that like it's 1 in 1,000 people are Jehovah's Witnesses or ex-Jehovah's Witnesses by population numbers roughly in the West. And we're really hoping to reach the 999 out of 1,000 with this story, right? Obviously, we're not going to get everyone to watch this movie. There's a lot of competition for movies and time, but we want to affect change in society. It's a social impact documentary. And mostly the reaction, so there's not a lot of reaction yet because the movie actually just went wide public release on Tubi like 3 weeks ago. So this is actually like a first early announcement on your show. So there's not a ton of reaction. So there's extra credit if you're here, if you're listening to this. is to go leave a review so I can find out what people think of it. But generally, the general public, the people who have no association with this religion, are shocked, they say they learned something. They can't believe that people would treat dehumanize someone to such a crazy degree.
Yes, that word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people are like really blown away because we toss people, how to say this, we give people like a little, hey, you're right, Jehovah's Witnesses are the people who don't celebrate birthdays and don't celebrate Christmas, and they come knocking on your doors. You're absolutely right, that is true, but there's like 40 other things like that are also not that important. Okay, great, now you know that all these weird things happen. Now we're going to show you how dark they are and how this destroys families. Watch. Okay, now there's a cascade of like 9 losses that most of us experience at some point, that one of the characters that you by this point in the movie, you love this person. And then you see all these people like have their world turned upside down. But what do they do with that? And it's something that's deeply human, because we can all go through something like that in our lives at different points. I was surprised by a few different people early on when we were doing the film festival run that were Catholic. They were like, oh man, that film was exactly my life, which kind of shocked me because I don't know, you're a former Catholic, so maybe you could relate to this, but I wonder, my thought on that, why Catholics would relate so much would be maybe because they really believed in the mythical worldview of a Catholic that Catholicism or Catholicism has painted for 1,000+ years, of angels and demons and God and hellfire and like that whole world that is the supernatural, the fantasy of it all. There's so many Catholics that like they just believe that that's always real, but then when they grow up and they're like, oh, Santa Claus isn't real, but then this is, oh, is that real? Is that? And eventually they're like, oh wait, maybe none of it's real. And maybe they have a more balance. I don't know. I'm not sure what everyone's like wake up moment is like, but maybe that's it, I was thinking, because Jehovah's Witnesses paint this picture and they're like, no, it's really real. Like demons are always watching. God's in your thoughts, reading your thoughts. And when you have that moment, it's like, oh, none of that is real. You know, I don't know. I'm just trying to I'm guessing. I would like to know what a Catholic thinks. I would like to know what other people really think. So if you're, write a review on IMDb and rate the movie really high. No, be honest.
Well, as a Catholic, they didn't really restrict us. Now, if you're going to reach out for the religion, the job of being in the religion, that means you're going to be a priest or a nun. You know, that's a difficult thing to stay with, because there's so many things that you're restrained from doing. So if that's what your parents are pointing you to be involved in, that would be very difficult. And then you change your mind, and then it just kills the family, you know, because they were putting their hopes upon you being a leader in the church. But with Jehovah's Witnesses, entirely different. There's so many rules and so many ways to get this fellowship. So,
yeah.
And because it's so random, and that the decisions are made randomly by so many different types of people.
Yeah.
Some places they're not so hard on each other as witnesses. Some countries are not, and other places they are very hard on.
Right. I noticed that because I bounce around from different congregations. I was in Wisconsin in a few different calls, and then Minneapolis in a few different ones, and then Florida, and then Ecuador, and then in Seattle, and then in Colorado, and I left. So like my cards are who knows where. I left in some congregation a long time ago by people I'd never probably even talked to. Don't even know who I was. But what I did notice was that there's a different culture, and then the decision makings around these punishments are based on the personalities of those 3 to 7 men, and like what they're feeling that week, or like what issues going on in that particular area. That,
you know, they have a manual that elder's manual that's supposed to tell them how to think.
Right.
These issues. That's impossible anyway.
And it doesn't work, right? Even if that exists as this is how we're supposed to handle this exact issue. Like it's completely the Wild West in terms of
yes, everybody's so different. Some people look harshly upon one sin, and another person doesn't look harshly on that same sin and says, "Oh no, I don't think we have this fellowship here, but we're going to watch it." And so, So go ahead.
Oh, we're gonna watch you. It just made me think of the poster art. I just want to call out, like, a few different ex-witnesses sent me art, and I created my own art in like therapy class, and that influenced the poster art, which has a woman emerging from darkness with an instrument, and there's like floating disembodied eyeballs. It's kind of like a horror scene. It's very weird. But it's because everyone's always watching. It's not just the elders watching you. It's like the active members are also watching all the other members and then reporting on each other in like this dystopian communist sort of like. Yeah.
Instead of getting instead of being wiser as the religion got older, they got harsher on issues, and made it more difficult. Why would you make it more difficult for people to stay in a religion? And then at the same time, you're sending them out to convert others go door to door, or used to convert people, make a large organization, and then watch them carefully to see if they break a rule, and then throw them out. It's very senseless. Yeah. So I think non-witness communities can see that, or, different peoples can see that. And they're wondering, where's the love? All they talk about, Jehovah's Witness, the most loving. What a wonderful brotherhood.
Have you ever seen Handmaid's Tale? I think that's also based on a book.
Yeah. Absolutely.
For me, people are like, well, what was it like growing up as a Jehovah's Witness? If anyone ever asked that question, which really nobody does, it's me bringing it up. But if I have the opportunity to say, like, if you want to know what my life was like, the closest thing I've ever seen in a movie to it was Handmaid's Tale, which is pretty intense and violent and abusive in many ways. But it's also, that's kind of what it was. And if they had their way, it would be a lot more like that.
Mm-hmm. You've heard people say, "Oh, my congregation was so wonderful, and we moved to such a place, and oh, that congregation was very difficult. I didn't like those people. Those elders were." They say negative things. So they're certainly not an ideal situation in as a religion as a whole, as from congregation to congregation. No matter how they paint the picture of this organization is so special and perfect, it isn't. And
they like to use the word unified.
Yes.
We are unified. They even sing songs about unity. And my experience is that I have no idea what my mom or my dad believe or my siblings believe. And they're all still in this group, this religious group, but they're not even able to tell their own family members what they actually believe, because it can't deviate from what they're told to believe, at risk of, if they do tell what they actually believe, that they would get reported and then shunned and abused. Yeah. So no Jehovah's Witnesses can actually tell you what they believe, because they're at risk of losing everything, losing their relationship with their family.
So you're proud of your decision to walk away from the organization. I was proud of my decision to walk away from it. But we came at it from a different direction.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting parallels, because I'm happy to know you. And I think it's really cool that we're having this conversation and sharing, but we have very different paths, but we have a similar mission. We've come to similar conclusions, and maybe we're doing it like we were talking offline, but sorry, I interrupted you. Did you? No. Okay. Like you joined the religion from Catholicism as an adult. I didn't quite have that experience, but I also wasn't quite born in. So it was sort of my decision, in a sense, to be a part of it. And but in a sense, you could say that we had light experiences, because we weren't completely mentally trapped our whole lives in it, or coerced our whole lives. Like your experience, the thing you're famous for is exposing the child sex abuse, the reports that you were having sent in, but you were so close to in the writing department with the writing of the Proclaimers book and other literature that like you had to say something when you found out there was something going on that was wrong. And when I experienced shunning, I was fine to leave the religion and let my family do whatever they wanted as individuals or as a group. I didn't want to think about it anymore. I wanted to move forward with my life. But they started using the emotional abuse and being coerced to do the thing that I never thought my family would ever do, because they were like on the fringes of the religion. I never thought they would be abusive towards me. And when they started doing it, I was like, whoa, you know what you're doing, right? And calling them out. And then they were defending their religion against me and using all the cult language. And I was like, you guys never talked like that. So I started seeing these patterns, and it started getting worse and worse over the years. I was like, I'm going to talk about this. Like, you shouldn't talk about the religion. And I'm like, that's what you do when you're a cult member. I'm going to say whatever I want to say. I need to expose this abuse for what it is. And it kept on affecting me even worse. So I had to make a movie about it. And I know that you've gone and done activism against child sex abuse with the SilentLambs project.
I was never abused, and I came out on because of a broken heart on behalf of those abused. And so I made the decision to come in the religion, and I also made the decision to go out of the religion. They didn't hurt me to put me out. So we come at this from different directions, but to watch the harm that this part of the witness's dogma causes so many people is more than I could handle. Because these people, they did something, whatever they did, and it's bad enough to be looked down upon because you didn't make the mark, you didn't reach the mark. And then to be shunned on top of it. So we all come from different directions on the issue of shunning. To see a victim, somebody who has been so harmed as the trauma of child abuse is, and then they're punished on top of it because their behavior is not what the witnesses want. You can't place them. You're damn if you do, and you're damn if you don't in this group. Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think it's interesting that you and I have done. I mean, there's so many activists out there. So shout out to everybody who's doing something. And that could be writing, it could be being in the religion and writing anonymously. It could be supporting someone else and making their channel work or editing. It could be being a YouTuber, a podcaster, writing a memoir, whatever that is, that piece of thing you have to do. And I think it's interesting that you and I were like, we have to do something big. We have to expose this. We're like whistleblowing in a sense. And it's not that I'm saying I'm the best whistleblower. There's a lot of other whistleblowers that inspired me to do something. And I hope that this piece of film history that we created will affect someone to go make something else that is also powerful.
We reach a different audience too, because of course the witnesses, they claim they have 8 million, which I doubt they do.
I don't think they do.
They're losing them by the millions. Anyway.
Yeah. Their numbers are down for 5 straight years. Like that's, so they're reported numbers. That's pretty cool.
So that the difference is in the people, like you're appealing to a group of people, or you're saying the harm was done to this type of person. It's in the music business. Some people couldn't care less. They're ex-witnesses, but they really don't care about those that are being punished and who are witnesses in the music business. You know what I mean? It's not their thing. Same with me. We'll go forward in what I do. I'm saying it's about victimization of children. Well, there's an awful lot of people that they say, oh, that's bad, but they move on. It's not a big deal. So all the voices that are speaking out, we need them all. Everybody's got a voice that someone else identifies with. And that's why this is so important, and why when I talk to you, and you're at a entirely different ballpark than I am.
Right. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, we're working on something that's greater than just ex-Jehovah's Witness problems. Child sex abuse, you found it was a rampant issue in this particular religion. But it also exists in other parts of the world. And also human rights, the violation of human rights and protection of children exists as a problem in every part of the world. So you're working on something that's like so universal. Shunning as an abuse, I think of the trifecta of evil within the Jehovah's Witnesses, it's child sex abuse, denial of medical care through the blood transfusion policies and their kind of Gestapo that sit at your hospital bed and make sure you die and become a martyr. And then shunning, like shunning does kill, but it's slower and harder to figure out because those ends up being suicides through mental illness or suicides through mental illness that happen after. But like deaths through medical care refusal and deaths from child or abuse from child sex abuse and the trauma that comes from that are like very obvious. And we already have laws in every country in the world for those things. Like they're criminal acts that are happening at the hands of this religion and protected by the hands of this religion, which is worse or just as bad, right? Like, oh, we know about the problem. We're not going to do anything about it. In fact, we're going to make sure that it doesn't hurt our reputation or our logo. Shunning's harder. It's like so nuanced. It's like, well, was that the real effect? Why the person was doing heroin and then overdosed? Turns out it was, and there's like hundreds of people that died from a heroin overdose because they were shunned. That's a problem. That's not heroin. It's like the shunning is the actual cause of the person to go seek alcohol or another substance abuse.
Recently, the Japanese had some Japanese attorneys. I think there were 7 of them came out to the media and talked about Jehovah's Witnesses and. They exposed the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses beat their children. Now,
yeah, that was a new angle. I mean, obviously, the physical abuse.
Right. It's a new angle. Yeah. I mean, in the United States or some other country, I'm beating a kid, big deal, you know. But to the Japanese, this was huge.
Yeah, and I mean, but it's also like really understandable, right? Like going to the Kingdom Hall. It wasn't quite a church session without a kid getting beaten while screaming in the other room, right?
Me. That's what our son said when we spanked him. Oh, you're killing me, real loud, you know.
You're killing me. That really adds some power to it. Wow.
How does it ever? I always tell people, I say, half of the congregation hated us because we spanked our kid, and the other half hated us because we didn't spank him enough. You know, you
can't win in that group.
I mean, we didn't beat him, we spanked him, but that was because the Bible said so, you know. Mm-hmm. And so, but some countries that's not appreciated, and so witnesses are criticized for that. That is a violation of human rights, a child's right. In some other country, it isn't. How do you please them all? And that's the problem that extreme religions or cults get themselves into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that they end up finding strange legal loopholes to protect, like under the religious protections of their culture or their laws, that they get to do things that are illegal. And that seems to be a strange thing that we accept as society as a whole. Like, oh, if it's a religion doing the abuse, it's okay. Yeah. Like, why is that okay? It should be just as illegal if we have children being abused, whether they're from their parents joined that cult or didn't join one.
Yeah. Like penitent privilege. Why give them this this way out? Right?
Yeah, you can tell them that you abused a child, and they can just ignore that and never tell the cops. But everyone else, if you find out about that, you're legally liable to say something.
It's a very complex world. And Jehovah's Witnesses are finding out how complex it really is. For quite a while, the 80s and then part of the 90s, after the Supreme Court decisions that Jehovah's Witnesses were involved with, so they got approved, you know, they got approval for many things. The culture is changing, and so things that they did back then, even in the door-to-door work, is not acceptable anymore. So
can you give an example?
Yeah, they have to change. Well, look at the example of the witnesses going door to door years ago, and it wasn't approved. They got from place to place. You ended up in jail, or you were they put castor oil down your throat, and you know. Then there was illegal decisions made that you weren't allowed to harm someone. They had freedom of expression. Well, now freedom of expression is kind of is a big
under attack
topic, So so for the religion, we don't want to make issues over little things, because we're also different, and we reflect that difference in the different religions we choose too, and clubs to belong to. But when you harm someone, that's a whole different one. What's considered harm, and that is also a problem. What really is harm? Psychological, physical, what might affect me, harm me mentally, doesn't harm you. So you see, they're right between a rock and a hard pile, aren't they?
Yeah, I've actually been learning a lot about that with testing out different therapy modalities and paying for therapy. That I learned something recently that, like, if you were to move apartment, everyone's done this, we move to a different house, the stress levels in your body has limits, like minimums and maximums of a chemical reaction. And you can have a cortisol spike that's equal to having to run from your life from a wild animal, or having someone you love die. Could be the same chemical spike as like moving to the apartment down the street where you hired someone and they did all the work and it went perfectly smooth. Like, it could just be stressful because you're changing your environment. But our bodies, we're just animals, so we have these reactions. And so someone can have a traumatic experience from something where someone like steals their favorite toy. It could be the same as someone being sexually abused. Maybe I'm just like making a crazy, ridiculous example, but like someone could really like go through something difficult internally, chemically, emotionally, totally different than someone else. And someone else might be able to tolerate something terrible just because they're made differently. But I feel like the one thing that we could probably all get from continuing to speak on these topics is perhaps governments realizing that, hey, we all have this universal capacity for suffering that comes from being mistreated, that maybe we could get some kind of universal mental health care, for example, in the next generation or something for our population, so everyone can kind of find a healthy way to learn healthy tools to deal with bad or unfortunate situations as a possible positive outcome of all of this, right?
Well, when you are thrown out of a religion, because religion, that seems to be the thing. You're in it, you may be born in it, and your parents are telling you this is very special, this is the best religion. So you are constantly hearing that you're the loser if you get out of this religion. So the reactions are different. How do people see? When I left the organization, I was very open about it. I said on TV that it was a badge of honor to be disfellowshipped.
Dateline, right?
I did not want that's right. I said I didn't. That was a program out of Nashville that aired before Dateline on television, and so it was the hour before. And I told the reporter that it was, as far as I was concerned, I thought it was a badge of honor because I didn't want to be connected with Jehovah's Witnesses. They had a reputation I didn't want. I thought people would think, my God, what kind of a person like that would belong to that kind of religion? So, but so many they lose the power over themselves. So how do you I got empowerment by saying what I did. How do you get empowerment when you're looked down upon?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I feel like there's an analogy I've been using about refugees. So we have a tragedy of natural disaster or a war or conflict where a huge population is moved out and everything's stripped from them, and they don't want to leave, right? Or economy could just collapse and they have to leave. Like in Argentina, there's a huge diaspora. In Venezuela, a lot of people. But also I grew up with Vietnamese refugees in Wisconsin. So like second generation children of this refugee population. And they don't want that situation, but it's like a mental shift where at some point, some of those people are like, hey, this is an incredible opportunity. We're in the United States. We're like the land of, opportunity or whatever the marketing is for the capitalist capital of the empire. Right. And they were like, let's start a business and let's try to make the most of this and give our kid an excellent education. And I feel like it's that mental switch that can happen. We're like, oh, this is terrible. We lost our friends, our family, our home, all of our wealth, all of our everything. And really, that's sort of a similar type of transition. You're like, well, when you get shunned, you're like, I lost my parents, my siblings, all my friends, all my community, all my support, probably my job. If you're like really in the religion, you're like connected to all these people in this community. You feel like you have nothing and everyone hates you. But really, it's like, yeah, but that's 1 in 1,000, right? There's like 999 more opportunities just waiting for you if you like can go embrace it, because now you don't have any limitations. You're untethered from all of these controls and systems and filters, and no one's watching you. In fact, people are trying to avoid you at all costs. It's like, actually, you know what? Those are the most limiting people in my life, and now they're no longer in my way. I can now go do whatever I want. What are you going to do with that freedom? Are you going to go get that education? Are you going to try that career? Are you going to go explore that passion for whatever hobby or sport that you had? Like, you can do anything. And that's the most interesting thing to me. And it was so important for our movie to like show the life after in some degree. Like, even if it's just like, you know what, I just want to relax. I've been working my butt off, going door to door, telling people stuff I don't believe for a very, very long time. And I didn't want to do it. And now I just want to like work in my garden. That's also fine. You can just go build birdhouses and work in your garden and be successful in that, right? Whatever the thing is. But I'm so impressed by people that, are like, I'm going to travel the world. I'm going to go to get my education. I'm going to like try and get a master's and a PhD and work in, this thing that they were passionate about. And I feel like everyone, no matter how old you are, should try that. And that's something I felt. You just talked about your pride for walking away. I thought that was it. I was like, for years, I after leaving, I was like, that's probably the most important thing I'll ever do in my life, is just deciding not to go to church anymore. That was awesome. I'm so relieved that none of that's real, and I don't have to deal with any of those people anymore and those crazy rules anymore. Yeah. I don't have to wake up on a Sunday and a Saturday for the rest of my life and do stuff I don't want to do. I can do whatever I want. Stuff that's normal to the regular people. Like, that was like, wow, that's it? That's the most pride. I was kind of depressed about it for a while. I was like, I want to do something more. I feel like I missed out on my 20s and all those opportunities that people get in their 20s. But it's like, at some point I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to go make it. I'm going to go try hard. I'm going to go learn something. I'm going to go find someone who's passionate in a like a thought leader or a professional in the space I want to be in, and ask them how to do it. And they'll teach me. And it worked. And I got an education in engineering from that, because I was like, hey, you do something that's fascinating. You put stuff on spacecraft. How do you do that? And they're like, oh, you want to learn how to do that? I'll show you how to do it. Come over to my place after class or after whatever your work is, and I'll teach you. I was like, that's it. That's so cool. And then I did. And I had like 3 mentors like that I found. Mm-hmm. And I think there's like, there's something that we talked offline. Is like, yeah, you missed out on your 19 to 24-year-old option to get a normal education. But now you're 30, 40, 50, 60, whatever that age is where you're out of the religion. You can still go to school, but the thing you have an advantage over a 19-year-old is that you're totally focused on what you care about. A 19-year-old's distracted by learning about sexuality and the cool party that's happening and alcoholism and every drug option and silliness that happens as a teenager.
And what the coach said. When I was in college, when I was 59, and wow. So there was a class you had to take. There was one particular class you had to have. And there were so many young men in that class. And I noticed that what they were, the coach was actually a teacher. So all they cared about was the game, the game. So and then from there, they experiment with this thing that they enjoy, and then they move on to something else until they find a place for themselves. I know the one professor talked to me. He said, you do pretty good in microbiotics. And I thought, how in the world do you think I would do it? But I didn't pursue that. But he thought so. And if I had had that desire, I would have pursued it. So other people can see too in these. They have the experience. We don't have any experiences as witnesses. We lost all the opportunities because they took away our experiences, and we allowed it because of the promises. That's why.
Actually, that's a really interesting conversation to start. Is you had an inner desire or a need to go speak truth to power with the Silent Lambs project and the Watchtower letters, I believe it was, right? Your projects. What opportunities came from doing that you think you never would have thought of?
Oh, well, of course, the media. I never dreamed I'd be involved with anything with the media. I was a watcher. I wasn't a participant in the media.
What kind of media experiences did you have? Because maybe not everybody knows.
Initially, it was of course, Dateline. But before that, worked behind the scenes to get a big article in the Courier Journal in Kentucky. That is what caught the interest of the people in New York at NBC. That article, and
right. So you wrote a little article.
It's a big article.
A big article, but a local article in a local paper magazine.
Well, the others
got picked up.
With me were interviewed. I worked on that article. I talked to the reporter, but I didn't have my name mentioned. I refused to have my name mentioned. I was listening.
Interesting.
And I also wanted to.
That's an interesting little point, actually. Why not have your name on there?
I wanted to come out when I wanted to come out.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So you're still physically in, mentally out in a way. You're keeping your reputation under wraps.
Sure.
For
just like
exposing.
when I was disfellowshipped. I maneuvered that whole thing so I would be disfellowshipped when I was ready to be disfellowshipped, where it would cause the most problems to the Watchtower. It did. It was right before date.
For the fight.
Yeah. So,
Nice.
So it was a matter of control and power to take it back because they had it all. And I was determined that they would not have it in my case.
I like that.
So I think with the same thing with making career choices, you make some mistakes or you know what you want. A lot of people fail at career choices, but they learn something from it. I learned a lot at Bethel. I learned an awful lot in the writing department. And so I was being taught. They didn't even realize that I was soaking it all up on how the organization operated. And I was very curious. And I told the elders at my judicial hearing when they were going to ask the big question at that one point is, how do you feel about the governing body? And then they get you. And so when the guy says, I got one question I want to ask you, I said, before you do that, I want to tell you something. And so I did. And they listened. The three men listened. And I said, I vowed to Jehovah I would never cross the threshold of a kingdom hall again until the governing body did something about child abuse. And you made me break my vow by coming here. So I put the onus on them. And didn't ever work. They were stunned. They didn't know what to say. So I learned that. I learned by observing and watching, as I learned about a lot of things, the condemnation of those in the organization rather than commendation. And you got so used to being condemned because you never did enough, you know?
Yeah.
So
That was an overwhelming feeling all the time. No matter what you do, it's never enough.
I commended it in college when I got chosen to stand up and say, and the professor says, your thesis was excellent. I could have sunk through the through the floor, because I was always used to, we only one gets credit is Jehovah and the organization.
Yeah.
You get used to it. You don't even know that you are so handicapped over, and you can't even take commendation.
Yeah. Pace, pitch, and power, Barbara. Next week, I think you're going to have to work on that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, you're finding your voice.
Sorry for triggering anyone.
In a marvelous way. But I got to tell you, I enjoyed watching this Tubi TV is free, and so I want everybody to know that. So, but I enjoyed watching this marvelous film, and yet at the same time, I don't like rock. I'm sorry.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
I like rock and roll, and and there's so much music I do love. How do you overcome? Because you got some real rock in there. So,
there's it's a bit too noisy, too heavy for you, for your taste.
Yeah, but that's my heritage and culture. So,
yeah.
But apparently, what you did appeals to different segments because it's moving, it's going places. And you don't just have rock in there,
Yeah, there's all kinds of music. It's actually, there's 42 songs in there, partially because I was 42 when it came out. And also shout out to Douglas Adams. 42 is the answer to life, universe, and everything. The big question in the famous trilogy, the 6-part trilogy. I've lost it. The Douglas Adams trilogy. Anyway, so 42 songs, but those songs are all, the first half of the movies is Jehovah's Witness music. And it's the music is all over the place, different kinds of genres. And mostly has no lyrics in the film because a documentary is mostly human beings talking back to back, nonstop dialogue. So I needed a soundtrack that was not competing with lyrics. And I wanted it was something I spent about 3-4 months of just doing soundtrack. And it was me going for long walks, listening to music from the 80s and 90s from this group of people that I'd never heard before, and trying to find something that emotionally connected to the topic that this person was saying at this particular point in their life story, and then coming back and trying it. I feel like this song would work at that point where Cindy's saying this thing, and this song would work with Chad saying that funny thing, and this song would work here and there, and I would go try it, and I'd probably have a little bit too much to drink, and then start again tomorrow after. I'd work a whole day at this neuroscience startup where I was working in engineering, and then I would turn around to my other computer. And it's all during the pandemic, 2020, 2021, and I'm editing over here on the other computer, and it's just absorbed emotionally in it. And there's it's not just heavy rock music. Actually, Rick played a little snippet from the very opening, which is maybe the hardest, heaviest song in the entire film, is the opening song, where we're kind of. And then it gets softer.
If you don't like rock, don't cool off just because of the opening.
Yeah,
because I didn't. And
in fact, continue. Sorry.
No.
Oh, actually, it's interesting that Rick played that point because that's an actual Jehovah's Witness talk by Ciro. I don't know. Did you ever meet Ciro?
Ciro was my buddy.
Oh, really?
Ciro Alessino. I saw him
Amazing.
every single day. And we had tremendously interesting conversations. When I left the organization, I called Ciro and I said, Ciro, because I was 4 years on working for Watchtower from my home. I actually have my paperwork where they appointed me as a researcher, and I'm here in Tennessee. And so we're getting to 96, 97.
You're already a remote worker. You're 2 decades ahead of the pandemic. Everyone goes remote moment. Yeah. You're living the dream of the 90s in the 90s. That's amazing.
Well, it wasn't a dream. It was a nightmare working for them because it was a lot on child abuse, although I did write some articles from home. Also, I did research for some of the men and saved them 6 months on research because I did it. They tell me the name of the subject. So,
but you knew Ciro. You were talking about Ciro.
So Ciro, amazing man. when I was there, he was 40 years at Bethel. He came in when my husband was in Bethel early in the 50s, and Cyril came in then. He knew everything. He was he knew where all the skeletons were in the closet, and so he used to tell me. So I learned a lot from him. We're two gossips, I tell you. And but we worked good together. And so when I left, I called him. Manifestos. And I told him. And you know what he said? I said, I'm leaving the organization. And I told him why. And he said, I agree with you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So why was
did he stay with it? Did he stay in the religion?
Yeah. I heard there not that long ago, he was at a party and he was dancing. So he's way up in his 80s. He's got to be near 90.
Oh, wow. Still going for it. Still in the religion.
So what?
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say that music, the heavier music that we open the film with, is also soundtracking Ciro giving his this little. It's actually just a moment of, but it's an actual like publicized convention talk that he gave about the end of the world, and he goes into gruesome detail about the fallen.
That
Oh, did he? Okay, well. Yeah. He's making waves even into this century now.
That's all. He used to pace. He'd go out on a special talk, and the men used to make their own talks up for a special talk when a congregation invites you directly. And so he used to put the microphone in his hand, and he'd pace up and down like a lawyer and on the stage. And he was so popular, and people were requesting him from all over the United States, and that didn't fly. And he was going off script.
He was going off the script of the governing body.
And that's when they started to write the outline for the talks.
Oh, wow. Ciro pushed him to the limits with his excessive imagination.
Hey, Scott, this is Rick. I'd like to play another portion of the film. You can tell the audience what's going on here. So let's play this, and you can give the audience an idea of what's happening.
Okay.
We'll share it now. Let's do it.
Dhammapada from Buddhism.
Ryan wrote, after he left the religion, his My Bible Volume 1, so he's describing what's in it.
Babylonian mythology. The Epic of Gilgamesh. Then the Books of Bokanon by Kurt Vonnegut, which is what I want read at my funeral. An article called Over 300 Proofs of God's Existence, which is sort of a joke. I put all of this in, and my thinking was I wanted to collect my own holy texts that were relevant to my life at the time, 2006. And so I did. I sewed it together and made a book.
It's actually like an interesting idea
to
4th
of July weekend, so I had a long weekend. My girlfriend, future wife,
write your own Bible, essentially, with what you think is valuable. That's part of your leaving process.
She wanted to show me Brooklyn. I'd never been to Brooklyn. And I was like, if we're going to Brooklyn, we're stopping by the Watchtower headquarters. Right?
This is one of the only times we actually talk about the Watchtower in the whole movie.
What I didn't know was my brother had broken a bone in his foot while helping somebody fix a fence. And they put a cast on his leg, and the cast was constricting. And he didn't feel very good, and he wanted to go get it taken care of, but he didn't have any health insurance.
We're getting into spoiler territory here.
No education, works 3 shitty jobs, none of them have health insurance. The family didn't try to reach me while he was in the hospital. I went to my phone. I saw that I had like 1 million messages.
Hey, Rick, can we pause it here?
And I didn't want to check him because I had to go to work. So the phone rang, and I saw.
Okay, cool. That was great. 'Cause that's a pretty big spoiler in the movie, and it's actually becomes this incredible cascade of emotional loss without giving exactly away what's happening. But that's just a taste. That's Ryan Sutter in the movie, and his story. He probably has about 20 minutes of time in the movie. It's about 80-minute movie, and everyone else has like 10 to 15 minutes. And that's a huge challenge when you're making a movie. I hadn't really thought about this when I was doing the interviews, because I was doing long format, big interviews, like 2.5 hours with everybody. And Ryan's was like a 4-hour interview. But really, when you make a movie, the package and idea, you can only really, each person only gets like 10 to 20 minutes total. And how do you tell your life story in 10 to 20 minutes? and it became a gigantic challenge. And it's also not interesting to just have one person tell their life story in a movie. You kind of need other people to help corroborate that story and give context to that story and give evidence to the things that they're talking about visually and with audio. And what was beautiful is that Ryan and also James Zimmerman, who was on here 6 months ago for the Kickstarter with you, Barbara.
Yes.
His book. Did you get his book actually?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Read it. Joe's reading it right now.
Oh, very cool. That's great. Do you want to tell us what you think of it, or what it was about, or give a little intro? Oh, it's on the spot, but the book.
Certainly. I appreciated especially the beginning of his life, to see the ins and outs of as people see what the Watchtower really is. I appreciated. He's very scholarly, He's very detailed. Some of the books that are out there are interesting, but Zimmerman's book is more, he's trying to teach too. He's teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had a website called watchtowerletters.com that's still up, and it's been for like 15 years. Where basically he wrote to the world headquarters as a witness, as a pioneer, longtime pioneer since he was 16, I believe, and ministerial servant. I don't know if he was ever an elder, but anyway, he wrote to the Watchtower asking for evidence for the global flood. It's watchtowerletters.com. Details all of that and shows exactly what he wrote to the Watchtower and exactly their responses. And using the Watchtower library, his whole thing was like learning logic and what logical fallacies are and how to do real research. He used the Jehovah's Witnesses' own literature to disprove so that his book goes into that to some degree, and the website does as well. And there's a lot of information. If you want to dive into James's findings from communicating with the Watchtower himself directly, that's an interesting read and deep dive.
I think we've had the book 6 months now, and I wrote him and I asked him some questions because I didn't quite understand one thing that he brought out, and I asked about that. He mentioned he was marrying people. Remember?
Oh yeah. He's been.
I said, tell me about that. Are you a minister? Just why are you back in religion?
He's pretty open about his lack of faith. He's written for Atheist Minnesota, and they presented the day after the Kickstarter. He presented at Atheist Minnesota as a public. They showed the film or showed portions of the film. And they talked about him and Ryan both presented publicly, and they've both been very active in the secular humanist space and with some atheist literature. Even I can't remember what it's called, but there's like an open thought, free thought foundation or free.org has a lot of literature. Had his book for a long time as a publisher. And he got his license to marry people. So on that point, so he can do secular marriages as a non-religious. I don't know what you call that. It's not a minister because ministers marry people in the religious context. But outside of that, there's another way.
He represented the state, like a judge does or whatever. Yeah. Joe did that. He got his license.
Oh wow, cool.
And he married. I think he married 3 couples initially. And then he gave it up. But see, he got hooked into it. Someone wanted him to marry them so badly and told him to get the license. So he went and he did that. So it wasn't that he really wanted to do it, but he was new out of the organization. And but after a while, he said, "Oh, it's not for me anymore." But
yes, Rick, you're talking.
I don't know. These comments that are I don't know if you're.
I can't see them. Oh, I do see them. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I was clicked on the wrong thing.
Diversity of those who are listening to us and their point of view. I always enjoy seeing.
Would you like to talk about some comments? This is probably a good time because we have about 35 minutes left.
King of the Dots, he's got several hours of Sir Alessino on tape to cassettes. He discovered the similarities with the Pharisees with Watchtower. Yeah, that's him. And He's kind of a renegade, but he knows too much, so they put up with him. In fact, he got himself in hot water years and years ago, before we came to Bethel, and they put him in the factory. And so he took him out of an office. I put him in the factory. Well, he did
Who
that
is this?
too. Sidlek got in trouble when he was young too, and he was removed from writing and put in the factory. That's a punishment, right? And so it must be, and they must look at it as a way to punish somebody. But yet, all those men who come into Bethel to print back then, print literature, didn't think it was punishment. So, so Cyril eventually made it back into writing, but he's the one who got into hot water about the United Nations. Every Wednesday he would go over to the city and go to the libraries because he was part of research. And so is that
actually true? Because there's a lot of ex-witnesses are like, hey, the Watchtower joined the United Nations, and that was a big no-no in the religion to never associate with them because they represent the wild beast or whatever or something. And was it actually true? Did Cyril was actually using the United Nations for library research?
Well, Cyril was going over because this is pre-internet, right?
Yeah.
So if you needed research material on our article you were writing, there was books out there that you could look at to find out if a subject was available. So, publishers put out stuff that you could look at. And so they would order and from Cyril. So every Wednesday he went into the 42nd Street Library, the big one, and he'd bring back books that the different writers wanted. And while he was there, somebody wrote, "Barbara knows where all the bodies are buried." You're not a kid. I know where they're buried.
Tell all.
But this is your show. And I've said so much about I did a Spanish interview recently that has just gone crazy.
Oh yeah, we should shout out Neri, the Neri channel.
Yeah, the Neri
he's
show. I told about all these secrets, see? And I know when I was doing it, Neri's eyes were getting bigger and bigger because he was so shocked.
Oh, can you give us some bullet points? What are some of the secrets?
Oh my God. I talked about stealing, those that were stealing at headquarters.
Oh, wow.
And that was a big discussion. There were so many things that talked about. Each subject is like a half an hour. Well, anyway, okay. Cyril goes into the city, and when he's there, he usually would go by the United Nations, see what's up, because you see they had a press pass. So Cyril had a press pass because the Watchtower was a medium, and so you could get if you're in like the Watchtower publishing house, then you could get a press pass. So he would go there and find out. He never told us he was going. I didn't know he was going. I just knew he was going to the library. And so he would go and find out what was going on in the world, and maybe something about Jehovah's Witnesses. But he didn't go into the big UN discussions because that wasn't for them to do. And so he would ask questions. They had a lot of brochures. If there was women's rights issues somewhere in the world, he'd bring back brochures, but I didn't know. And because there were so many writers who wanted different things, and he knew his audience. He knew who wanted what. So he gets this idea to. They didn't join the UN. It was the Department of Information. That aspect that the press were involved with. So those that answered at the UN who answered were with that department.
Okay, folks, everyone listening, you heard it first from Barbara Anderson. It wasn't the leaders of the Jehovah's Witnesses, God's true representative on earth, that joined the United Nations. It was the writing department, Barbara's Barbara's cohorts.
But he had to sign paperwork, and he got Lloyd Berry had to sign the paper. Bob Johnson and the service department signed this paper that they were what was it, DPI or what were they? I can't even remember.
Someone brought up the UN DPI in the list here,
but they were called I can't even remember.
That's Anthony Mathenia, Trash Pandia.
So so when it all hit the fan in England, as a man had gone up, a reporter had, all they had to do was the list of all the organizations that belonged as, I can't think of what they're called, who belong to that aspect of the United Nations. Mm-hmm. There's a huge list of all of them, and Watchtower was on that list for years. So anyway. That's part of old age. You can't get it.
There's a couple funny. You're good. There's a couple funny comments in here.
The Department of Public Information, but they were. That's part they belong to, but it's NGO. Maverick.
Non-governmental organization.
Non-governmental organization. When are you getting your 80s? See if you remember.
Someone said that they read 7 years of The Awake and got a free college education. And the next person says they read The Awake for 12 years and lost 12 IQ points.
I remember when they were saying that too.
It's not you don't get an education from The Awake. It's like at a 5th grade reading level, right? Why is that?
I disagree.
No. Okay, what was it?
Structured for 8th grade.
8th grade reading level. Okay. So we're graduating middle school with the Awake magazines.
Well, anyway, Cyril got the blame. And the article,
oh, really?
The article that came out, it's all the articles always said that, the harlot, it was always negative about the UN. And all of a sudden, 91, I think it was December of 91, and they got this article. I mean, the whole magazine was practically on the United Nations. There was a big globe on the front. It was all positive. So I go into Cyril's office that morning, and so we established what needed to be done. And see, because I was a researcher, so I had to use that what's available there from what I need, and. So then all of a sudden he brings up the subject of the United Nations, and he said, "How'd you like that article on the United Nations and in the Awake?" And I said, I really like that. I even said something to Joe about it, that I like the way they handled it. They didn't call it names, they didn't disparage it. I said, they talked about the pluses of the United Nations. I said, that was good because, if somebody gets interested in the witnesses, when you're having a Bible study later on, you can introduce the negatives about that. But to put as condemning as they did about the UN, I said, that doesn't attract people. And he said, so you liked it? I said, I liked the way it was written very much. He said, guess who wrote it? And I said, you. And he said, yes. Nice.
So here you are working with the Central Committee of the World Headquarters of Propaganda, trying to influence people in a positive way about the United Nations.
I said, that's why it was so kindly. I said, that's why, because you wrote it. But he was the one that convinced Lloyd Berry to be part of that, a part of the United.
So interesting. To Ciro's point, I'd listened to the entire discourse that went with this, that we used that little snippet for the movie, right? But I was like, well, when I went to re-edit the audio last year to master it, I was like, I would cut this piece. I want to readjust it. I want to make it better. So I found a better version of the talk. And I was like, I have to find it. And it's 2.5 hour long talk from a convention. It's like, it's 2 hours or something. It's so long. And that part is like 4 minutes of a 2-hour long thing. I listened to the entire 2 hours looking for it, but also I was like, what else? What other crazy stuff does he say? And he's actually pretty inspirational about paradise. And he's obviously, there is no, to give him credit, since we're being nice to the guy today, he's your friend, but, or was, but like he gets really fantasy about the future paradise, afterlife, whatever, the immortality reality that Jehovah's Witnesses try to sell to everybody, the you'll never die experience after the genocide, that whole thing. He gets really into like, what is it going to be like imagine it. And the cool concept that Jehovah's Witnesses sell, like make the truth your own, imagine yourself there. It's not healthy if it's not real, probably. I'm not recommending that you go do this, but that was actually kind of an interesting piece of it. And if you're a Jehovah's Witness or ever were an active Jehovah's Witness, like, you're not allowed to really do that. They're like, no, we gave you the communist propaganda of people farming and carrying fruit and vegetables around wild animals. That's what you get. Just keep on picturing that. But Cyril was like, no, we'll take it farther. Let's go there in our imaginations. And it's almost like he did a thought experiment to travel to this future and imagine what it's like, which actually was more abstract and interesting than the average Jehovah's Witness talk.
That's right. Well, that before they printed up the talks, and then interesting that it was in the writing department that certain people were assigned in the service department to write the outlines. See,
okay,
but you had to stick it to the outline because of what Sarah and others were doing, putting their opinions and their viewpoint in the talks, and it led to trouble. One of the men in the service department told me, he says, I got to tell you, he said, when the governing body go out on these special talks, he says, some of them say things, and this is, of course, most of this governing body he's talking about are deceased. So when I was there, they died during the 90s or during this century. So he said, they would say some things that weren't society's policy. And he said, so what would happen is people would write in to the society, which would go to the service department on these issues. And he said, we would have to answer it and we'd have to make excuses. And he says, after a while, we got sick of it. And he says, so you know what we started doing? Every time we had a complaint about a governing body making some weird statement, we sent it to that governing body to answer. He said, let them get themselves out of it. So you see, they were human. They were just as human. This organization, we can talk negatives, but you can also talk about the human factor. They handle things just like any other organizations would handle them, and lots of things you discussed it with people. I got the saying that this would be a wonderful world if it wasn't for people. Because we tend people, we ruin everything, I
like what George Carlin said before he passed. George Carlin said that he likes human beings a lot. One-on-one, they're awesome. But as soon as you group together 2 or more, they become terrible, and he has no hope for humanity as a whole. And he's like, I'm kind of okay with it. You know what? We're all going to self-destruct, and we deserve it because we're kind of assholes when we group together.
We know it. And so there's so much you could talk about.
There is.
And you could talk about it from other viewpoints in the Methodist Church, if you were a Methodist. I mean, the big Methodist Church here is 100 years old. They just recently resigned from the World Methodist Organization. And that's what's happening around the world, because so many people don't want to vote. They want to be Methodist, but they don't want a woman minister.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting issue right now. There's a big divide. An actual official divide happened already. Was it earlier this year or in the last year between 2 groups of Methodists?
Yeah, this church dropped out. They're independent now. So you see, this is just and plus half of the United States is moving towards secularism. So there's issues everywhere. It's just to try to find a place for yourself to climb out of the issue and make a happy life for yourself, something It's hard because we all have negatives. There's negatives from family and pressures and everything. And we're here to say that there's life after the Watchtower.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I would like to actually talk a little more about that. Someone in the comments asked a question to you, but just before I jump into that, we have this channel is really interesting that Rick Fearon runs and Barbara works on as a call-in show. So we can have people call in, I believe. Otherwise, we can just do comments, right? So if you comment and you have a question, I can field questions. Barbara can field questions, of course. But as far as the movie goes, please go watch it on Tubi. That supports the project. Share it with people you know who would be interested in that. And if you want to do extra credit, we're looking for 100 rating and reviews on IMDb. And there's a few other places you can do that. Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb is great. TMDB, the movie database. IMDb means the Internet Movie Database, and the Rotten Tomatoes, and also Amazon. So those 4 places are great, but anywhere you can review it or rate it is awesome for us because it helps boost the algorithm and helps show other people that, hey, there's value here. And it gives accurate reviews. The more reviews we get, the more accurate the number is, and people respect those numbers a lot but on those websites.
What's next for you?
Oh, actually, this is interesting because one question I asked you earlier about like what happened when you came out and did your projects, right? Like you said, you got some media attention and now you work on human rights and you work on videos and you're doing all this other stuff. So just saying, hey, we're putting this movie out, can you support it? That was a marketing push. And also we needed the money. So we did the thing we said we were going to do, and just publishing that everywhere during that 30 days, like 6 months ago, with your help and others. A cult researcher who is running her first conference after her book, her wildly successful book, Anka Richter's Cult Trip. She's running Decult in a conference, and she invited me to speak there and show my film there. So I'm premiering the film in New Zealand in October. And so that's basically just like marketing the film still this year, but cool things are happening. I got reached out to by someone who's working on a project. I don't want to say too much, but it's a museum related to Schindler, the famous Schindler movie.
Oh, yeah.
And so that might be a gig I work on, and it's a museum piece that'll be installed permanently. So there's a film related to that, a documentary. And then also another film is being worked on out of LA, and someone involved in that got in touch with me. And so there's little things happening that are just like reverberations or like reactions to what I'm working on. They're like, hey, talk to that guy. Oh, hey, reach out to him and see if he wants to help us with this thing. Hey, maybe he can get us in touch with that person. So I'm like making these connections, and people are coming out to me and are coming to me and offering things or starting a conversation. And also I'm hoping to do, I'm trying to reach back into, I've been involved with the ex-Jehovah's Witness community, this identity that we all retain after we leave this religion. And that's an interesting topic on itself, the identity around it. But what I find is that I now have all these skills to do a YouTube channel, to do a podcast, to make a documentary, that I would like to show other people the way. If you have an interest in that, I now have skills that I could use to mentor others or guide others or be a producer on your thing, or help if you want to start from zero. I'm now connected to there's hundreds of ex-Jehovah's Witness channels, and there's the people outside of this community. There's people in the ex-Mormon world who are awesome, and there's people in the Orthodox Jewish world who are doing interesting things. And then there's activists in the human rights space that are doing really interesting things with this religion, but also outside of that. So there's all these organizations that like this project has connected me to, and I want to continue in that space while also like reaching a hand back and being like, hey, let's do this together. I can help you get your YouTube channel up and running and monetize and doing it professional in 6 months instead of 4 years or something. So I want to help people as well as pursue these other projects that are related to human rights.
You have to make a living.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. So,
and that's a piece of it, right? It's not just like go do activism and be do it all for free. Like there's an element of like, well, maybe you can do both, where you're doing really powerful activist work while also the system you set up actually funds it. And so I'm trying to crack that code, because I feel like so many people are trying to do this, and some people are very successful. But I want to create the system and then show other people how to do it.
Well, all of this has been very fascinating. And what about Rick wants to? He offered for others to chime in here because we're.
Yeah. Well, let's do that right now, Barbara. If anyone would like to call into the program, or if you'd like to come in via StreamYard, I'm going to put the telephone line up right now so you'll be able to see it. So just give me a second to do that. But if you want to call in, if you're on our line right now and you'd like to say hello to Scott or Barbara and talk about the movie Underground, the documentary, go ahead. You're on with us. Go ahead and speak up. By all means, come in. And also, if you want to come in via StreamYard, what you do is you go to the YouTube description and you'll see a link. If you hit that link, you have the option to come on in video or in audio only. So why don't you give that a shot? Hit that link and come on. I think it'd be wonderful to get some comments coming in. So why don't you give it a shot? Did you see the movie? Did you see the documentary that Scott produced with the ex-witnesses? He'd like to get some feedback from it. So go ahead, by all means. So don't be bashful. Go ahead and hit *6 on your telephone pad or come in via StreamYard. Well, Scott, I wanted to tell you it's really remarkable that you were able to create this film. Making a film is not easy. I'm sure that you will know that. Some people think, oh, it's just, take your camera and start shooting. It's not that at all. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and I give you a lot of credit, Scott. It takes a lot out of you as well. And good job. And then what the movie does show is it shows that Jehovah's Witnesses were inhibited. They were not able to do the things normal people did. And when they left the Watchtower, they could now experience things. They could be happy once again. They could get together and sing, and that's what I really take from the documentary. I feel that it's entertaining, it's informative. But you mentioned something earlier talking to Barbara that made sense to me. A movie like this, if people really sit back and try to see what it's saying, and you're hoping a movie like this can connect with people and let them see how people really are involved in cults and what it does to them and how damaging it is. And even the government, as you were saying earlier, if they have in their repertoire of information concerning mind-controlled cults, it'd be nice if this movie or your documentary could land up in that repertoire.
That would be a positive result. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, well, I mean that, Scott. Let's go to I think it's Virginia. Go ahead, Virginia.
Hi, it's Pixie. I want to congratulate you, Scott. That's great that you finished that picture. It sounds wonderful.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Pixie.
I'm a filmmaker myself.
Wow.
Give Barbara your number because I might need some crew. And also, I might have a link for you on that Schindler thing because I've done
cool.
documentaries.
Awesome. I would love to connect with you.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I'll throw my official email in the comments so you can write me.
Okay, and Rick has my number and Barbara does too.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks.
Nice to hear from you. Mm-hmm.
So let us know what you think. Come on in. We got a number of people listening in on the telephone line. Even if you didn't see the movie, why don't you ask Scott about it? Ask him what his intentions were. Of course, Barbara went through a lot of this. But if you made a movie, if you're listening online today, what would your movie be or your documentary be about the Jehovah's Witnesses? What would you? In fact, even Scott did mention, he's into this. Scott is a professional person that knows how to produce films, so he might even help you if you have a good idea. Would you have a good idea for a documentary about Jehovah's Witnesses? Now, don't be bashful. Come on, let's hear what you have to say. What would your documentary be? What would you like to talk about if there was a movie? What would you like to see in a movie? Scott has his ears.
That's a great question.
Yes, so Scott has his ears open. He'd love to know what you think. So go ahead and hit *6. Come on, folks. We got a lot on here. Let's get you on talking.
I do see there's a comment from Debbie Moore. Like they want to start in the chat. They want to start a podcast. They don't know how. But yeah, that's how we all start. The desire is the most important thing, and putting your voice out into the world. And I think Barbara's a great example of someone who put her voice out into the world, and it took her places she didn't expect. And same with this project. I didn't expect to start a podcast or a YouTube channel, but now that I have a movie, I was like, well, how do I get that out in the world? And there's so many more stories I need to tell them. I want to put those on my YouTube channel and just see what happens. And now it's becoming a thing, and I really enjoy it, actually. And I've got skills that I can now share with others. So
also, there's stories as Jehovah's Witnesses. You hear about stories. Some of the stories of about fellow witnesses should be a movie. It should be a horror movie. I mean,
yeah, that's what the world needs: more horror movies about the Jehovah's Witnesses.
There's murder. You know, you can do films about some of the stories. You don't even have to mention Jehovah's Witnesses.
That's
but
true.
The stories are. Look at all these script writers that spend so much time writing a script for a movie to sell that, and it's about murder and mayhem, right? Well, there's murder and mayhem in Jehovah's Witnesses organization, I swear. And you have, there's an occasion many years ago, I have a lot of the information on this, where the two kids, there was a couple at Bethel before in the 70s, and they were very, very nice people, I understand. They left Bethel, have children. The children got older. They hated being witnesses. 2 sons, they killed their parents. What a story, the background of all of that.
Yeah, there's a big lack in true crime. You and I, Barbara, were talking offline about that. There's criminal activities happening all the time. There's court cases for actual crimes happening every month. There's a new one. There's someone else convicted or charged or put in jail or prison.
If you want to be in the film, if that's your thing, you want to do like Scott is doing.
I did just get a question. All great points, and I think there's a huge need for narrative script writing, and for this topic. And like you said, you don't have to name the religion, but someone just mentioned asking me a question: what was your biggest challenge in rebuilding your life after leaving? To me, I think the biggest challenge was, for me, it was a big relief, like deciding to not go to the Kingdom Hall anymore. I was like, finally, I can do what I want to do. I was in my mid-20s and just like ready for that. And some people don't go through that experience. So for me, it was everything's available to me now. I went to school and I started a band immediately, and got an education in engineering. This is all during the economic crisis. But like, I think the challenge, so those were challenges that were hard, but also enjoyable and exciting. But the thing that's remained, I've been out 15 years, and I've been shunned for 15 years by my Jehovah's Witness family members. And I think the thing that's like revealing itself later on, that's still a challenge, is that I'm drawn to people who have bad intentions, and I can see the red flags, and somehow I'm like, oh, I should go deeper and I should stay here. And I'm like looking around for like, who's watching? What are the dangers? And the person I'm dealing with is the actual danger. But I'm like thinking that it's outside. And then I get involved with these people who are more narcissistic or have selfish, they want to do something that like rips me off for their selfish gain or something. So I'm still dealing with that kind of stuff. And I feel like it's not a rebuilding my life issue, but this stuff stays with you. And it's like, I'm drawn to that because it was familiar. I'm drawn to that because the Jehovah's Witnesses are filled with people like that, and they teach to do that to others, and to look out for yourself, and to put people down, to raise yourself up the hierarchy. And this is human stuff, but like there's just a higher concentration. I think there's a higher concentration in that type of group, just because of the way it's organized and the way it's controlled. And I'm familiar with it, so I'm drawn to it, and it's not healthy. But getting an education was important. I highly recommend that to anyone, however you go about that.
Why are so many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses committing suicide?
You're asking me that?
Yeah.
I think it has to do specifically with the pressures when you're in it. Like you said, you're never good enough. And with shunning, the pressures of having to shun someone, the cognitive dissonance of living as a person doing that to someone you love. And then once you get out, being treated that way, which is abusive, that is the direct result of the active coercion of the religion weaponizing your family against you. And the people that are doing it are actually, like, in my opinion, the real victims, but it's really hard to deal with being shunned. And some people just don't want to go on. And there's another person who has a channel that I just had on my channel. Steph Woke Up. Her channel, she says the line, people are literally dying to get out of this religion. And so suicide is a huge problem that someone should get an education and do real research to prove the amount of suicide that's happening in and outside of this religion, find out specifically what it is due to, so that we can put a stop to it and make it illegal, because this is a terrible aspect of this religion and what it does to general society. And this is happening in everyone's neighborhood, right? It's not just to ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that we suffer. Active members of the religion die. These are cousins and aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews of other people not a part of this religion who are dying by suicide. Get my language right.
Hey, we got a caller coming in from the United Kingdom. Go ahead, talk to Scott if you would. 447. Go ahead, you're on with us. United Kingdom 447. Go ahead, you're on with us. Go ahead and say hello, Scott.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I just wanted to ring up and say to Scott, I'm really glad that he's doing this film. I'm going to watch it. I will review it. But I just wanted to say something. He said earlier that there probably are a lot of suicides associated with the religion, and someone needs to look into it. Well, I used to work in a rehab, and we had several people coming through who were the shunning kids of Jehovah's Witnesses, because I picked up on that straight away. And 3 of them that I know of personally actually did die of heroin overdoses. That's 3 that I know personally, through work. Wow. So I know it was an offhand comment that you made, but you're not wrong. That's what I wanted to say.
It would be great to have your professional input on this somewhere, sometime, if you have that interest to write about it, because not enough information is coming from the secular world or from real research or making the connection, because obviously they died from actual heroin in their body, and we know that, but the result of the reasons why they're using the drug is fascinating, and no one's really talking about that.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, definitely. And John Lennon, I think of one of his films, he also had that problem. And I remember he was screaming mother in one of his films. And I think there's a big connection between shunning, of parental shunning in particular, and kids and the way they react to that. And the funny thing is that 2 out of those 3 were artistic, in the sense that one was an artist, really good artist, and the other one I know played guitar because he brought it in, and he was playing and singing, in the lounge room. So at least two that I know of were quite artistic. It's quite interesting that you've used that vehicle as a way of kind of telling stories, because I think there may also be a connection with kids who are artistic being particularly vulnerable. Maybe that sounds a bit sneaky, but being particularly vulnerable to, or maybe sensitive to the way others treat them, or maybe just, I don't know. But anyway, that's definitely a thing for sure.
Yeah, I really appreciate you drawing a parallel there and seeing that from your own experience, because I don't know the answer. But in my case, I knew a lot of musicians.
Yeah.
Partly, I feel like they're able to process their trauma and their emotions in a healthy way through art and music. But there's also, maybe they're more sensitive to their emotions because they're artists. I don't know. I would love for someone to, who knows, to chime in.
It's interesting though, isn't it? It is interesting. Yeah. It is interesting, but it's definitely something. I also met funnily enough, quite a few elders as well. They tended to be the alcoholics, but it was interesting. A couple of elders at least. One was an ex-elder, but maybe he'd been disfellowshipped for alcohol. I don't know, but I remember clerking a couple of elders when they came in. You know, because they mentioned they were Jehovah's Witnesses, and then they said they were elders. And
were you also?
Alcohol, so.
Okay. Were you also a Jehovah's Witness at some point in your life? Okay.
Yes, I was. Yes.
Could
yes,
you?
I was, yes,
did you work professionally then in like a self-help capacity?
Yes. Yes, I'm a nurse, so I worked in a rehab. So that's where I met most of them. Although one that I knew was a neighbour, and he committed suicide. He didn't overdose; he committed suicide. When he was shown, I left him, you know, when that happened, but he actually committed suicide.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how he died exactly, but he was a neighbour of mine, and he was another shunned person, another shunned child parent, not, you know, shunning. So I think it's incredibly common. Someone once said to me that they had estimated that around 10,000 Jehovah's Witnesses died from the blood issue, but I don't know about shunning.
Yeah, in fact, that's a huge area of research that someone could do, and a documentary could be made while doing that research, perhaps, just as an idea out there, or even a YouTube video. Let's keep it simpler. You could do a YouTube video where you interview a professional, and like that's maybe I'll work on that. But if anyone knows somebody or wants to come on my show and talk about that, let's talk. It's a heavy topic, and I'm not skilled in talking about it, but it's worth talking about.
Okay,
thank you for sharing.
We got go ahead. We got another call. We got another. I'm sorry. Do you want to say something, sister?
Okay.
Go.
Thank you anyway. Thank you,
thanks.
Barbara.
Thank you.
Okay, we got another caller coming in. Go ahead, caller. I believe it's 978. You're on with us.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. Scott, I was wondering, what didn't you cover that you wish you could have covered in the movie, or what did you wish you could have covered more?
I feel like we did well with humanizing the Jehovah's Witness artists with their vintage footage and their experiences. The losses, every film on the topic so far pretty much deals with these kinds of human losses. I think there's a big area so I feel like that worked how we did it, but we weren't able to show the losses, really. We were able to show the characters sort of like processing having their world turned upside down. And maybe there's room in, maybe like Apostasy does a good job as a narrative, and The Confessions of a Teenage Jesus Jerk does a good job. Those are both ex-witness films, and they do a great job of kind of painting the picture with a narrative in a great way. They do a really exceptional job. But there's room for more of that. But I feel like there's really no other film that does the life after. There's films that talk about activism, like the one that Barbara was in with Crusaders, that does the activism angle. But like, how do you make a life after is like a really difficult topic to show. And it's sort of like, these are people just becoming normal. They're just, they want to knit and like do gardening or like travel. And it's like, there could be more, there's a lot of room for kind of expanding on like, well, what happens after this group of people who successfully navigated cult mind control and are a self-selected group of pretty smart people, got out of this trap and then went and did this thing that's so exceptional after leaving. There's a lot of room to tell more of that. And I feel like we just sort of touched on it in the film.
You're a success story, and we're doing an interview with you. This is like a film on your life. And
thank you, Barbara.
Why don't we do success stories?
Yeah.
Instead of the depressed stories.
Right. Yeah. We just advocated for making a movie about suicide, but actually we could do a movie about life after.
Yes,
and a part of the reason why I wanted that, it was essential for me to put something like that in our documentary, was because I know people do kill themselves. And I wanted to show people like, hey, this is your life on film if you're an ex-witness, right? Or if you're a witness and you see this, or if you're an active, any religion, Mormon or something, and you watch this, you're like, yeah, I lived something like that. And then it got really terrible for a while. But then there's like chapter 3 where you get to do whatever you want, and it's awesome to do that. It's awesome to try to make the life you want.
We heard how bad it was for you at one point, and then we saw how good it is for you at this point, and getting better as time goes on. So we need more of that. How about some wonderful films on YouTube? Interviews not about the negatives on Jehovah's Witnesses. How about the positives? How about the positives moving forward? I'm just saying, because we can mention all the sad stuff, but we learned a lot. How many ex-witnesses have said that if it wasn't for them learning how to speak, they wouldn't be where they are today, where they have the ability to speak to strangers, talk to strangers, because of what they learned when they were young. I mean, yes, we could beat it all to death on the shunning, but we also have you as an example, and many others who are successful, and but they don't talk about it, like
that's true.
About the negative.
What's been really fun for me is with I have the Witness Underground documentary, which is what we've been talking about for the last 2 hours. And so thank you. But I also have the Witness Underground YouTube channel, and the film is there if you become a member. So that's one way to watch it. But it's not just that. I have 170 videos, mostly me interviewing other artists who've also left their religion. So if you really want to dive in, that's the living, breathing version of this film. And I've been loving doing it. I'm going to keep on doing it. And what's really cool is that now that I have gotten better at it by trying hard and improving with every video, and learning how to be a public speaker and to say and and like a lot less, that all comes from trying hard. I've been able to interview people, and I've been introduced to people who are at really high levels in their careers. And I'm not a big celebrity person, but at the same time, these are becoming friends of mine, and I'm so impressed by their work. And I just did a big interview series with Bonnie Root, just to shout out her. She's in a new horror film that's just coming out. She's making her own film. She's actually making a movie called The Diary of Heather Keating, which is about her experience as a young Jehovah's Witness woman being interrogated by 7 elders. So that's exciting. There's like new cool projects, but she's got 30 plus years of like being in Hollywood films and TV shows that you've probably watched, like Law and Order and stuff.
Well, okay.
And so there's people like that, like you said, that don't ever say anything about it. And there's people that are very famous, and we all know that they're ex-witnesses, but they won't talk about it. But every once in a while, someone's like, you know what? Now that I'm where I want to be in my career, I'm comfortable owning the fact that I grew up in this weird background as the Jehovah's Witness, so I'm going to just say it. And like they're ready to do so. And I have this beautiful privilege to be like, yeah, it would be awesome to have you on the show, and like let's talk about your career in Hollywood or your new album that you came out with, I'm always on the radar for like getting Dave Mustaine on, or Cat Williams, or Donald Glover, or someone like at the huge level who also had this experience, or any of the Wayans family. But at the same time, like I'm so happy to also just like show off an artist who just put out their first album, and or they want to make their first film, and they're still like learning. It's like that's also really cool, because I was also there. And I'm not just like looking for stars.
I want to thank you so much. In fact, Barbara, we're going to have to end it here pretty close to time here.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to say to Scott that, I really, some of the musicians, in fact, in the movie, they're really, really talented. And we're going to have a convention. It's about 17 months away. It's in August of 2025.
Wow.
And it's the first ex-Jehovah's Witness convention up here in New England. And if you're in contact with some
in person.
Oh, in person, yeah. We've already got 200 people that have said they will attend. We got some really big speakers coming in. We're going to have some music there. So I want you to, at least let some of the people that were in the movie realize that if they'd like to come up, we do have one band for one day. They're ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. They weren't in your movie. And if you'd like to have someone come up, or if they'd like to come up, we may be able to help them do that to get here. So
I love that.
Yeah, so
that's great.
So have them get a hold of me at jwworldnews@gmail.com. We're going to try to make this a huge event. We got room for 500 people, but already I'm beginning to think. I'm not trying to, think bigger than ever, but I've got so many people responding to this. It's not. It's really exasperating. It's unbelievable. So we got 200 people already signed up to go.
No,
Amazing. We got to have room for like a mosh pit or like a circle pit or something.
we need a guy with to film and make a movie out of
that sounds good.
The convention.
Yeah. We'll get all the YouTubers to come down and live stream on their channels.
Well, we're going to have, in fact, on Saturday night, we're going to have a YouTube award night, and we're going to give awards. Cool. We're going to give awards for some of the YouTube videos that really made a difference. And we're also going to have authors. Also, we're going to recommend that you read certain books and certain authors that have really made a difference in getting people out of the Watchtower. So it's going to be quite the event. On Friday morning, might go pretty much into the afternoon, but we're going to have all those that come, if they like to speak up and get 5 or 10 minutes to tell us where they're from, why they love the Watchtower. So it's going to be quite fascinating. And we're going to have some big-time guests there. I'm not sure yet. I'm working on getting Paul Grundy. I'll be in touch with him this week. He's with JW Facts. I mean, that is the best website you could ever imagine.
What a resource. We even included, just to shout out Paul Grundy, we included JW Facts, a few scenes from his website that were talking about the global flood. So like that's such an amazing resource that's been available for so long. Mm-hmm. So thank you for making that available in public. And JW Facts.
So it's all going to be a good event. And what got me thinking of this is I was down at the protest they had in Washington D.C. on Halloween Day, and what it wasn't anything to do with Halloween. It just happened.
Be Free 23, right? That one.
Right. Yeah. So I was down there, and there were 223 people, and that was a protest, Scott. And so at the end of the protest, I couldn't help notice that all the ex-witnesses were hugging one another and taking emails and contact information on their phone. They really were so pleased to be together. Now, I've tried to bring people together before for a protest, but not everybody's into that, and I can understand that. But for an ex-witness convention, when I first mentioned on my radio program a month or so ago, the next day I'm looking at all these emails. Rick, book me in, I'm coming. So
I want to put an idea in your head that might expand the idea. I went to a thing called Interfaithless. It's a beach party put on by an ex-Mormon. And I met some other ex-witnesses there and some other ex-Orthodox Jews there. Yeah. And so they call it Interfaith to bring in people that went through something similar. And that was actually maybe the most rewarding event I've ever been to, because I've been to a number of different ex-witness events. It was because it's bigger, it's more broad and open. And it was just about having a good time, which is a big change from the context of a protest or like let's hang out and be each other's therapists for the afternoon. We can go and actually like listen to music and have some fun and make something positive out of this.
Oh,
you're in good company.
We had one woman write in. She says, Rick, why don't we make it like Woodstock? She says, we can all camp out to get a big field. I says, well, wait a minute. That'd be a little bit difficult.
Yeah, we'll bring our own mud.
Yeah. So I said, no, I think we'll do it where people can get up and go to the bathroom and get a cold drink if they want.
They are a nice hotel.
Yeah.
But I do like the idea of there being music and a performance and something modern and special, something alive that's not just listening to our modern version of a number 2 talk or something.
Oh yeah. So if any of those people in your movie would like to come, have them get a hold of me and we can work out something for them. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. I'll let them know. And there's a lot of other artists that are active musicians, some in that area and all over the country and world actually, that might be interested as well. So definitely put that on the radar.
Well, I'm so glad you could come on today and talk with Barbara. She really loves you, Scott. I can tell you that right now.
I want to do a shout out because Barbara's got a book in the works. I know she's keeping it top secret, but let's make sure that we support her and help her get her book out.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I get things I could say too, but Barbara told me to keep my lid shut. So
yeah.
There's more coming. See, Barbara earned my trust. She tells me things I don't say a thing, Barbara.
Oh, he doesn't. He's very good about it.
I just want to see Barbara on her book tour And I know you're not 30 years old anymore, but you can do this, and it's
I
going to be
got
awesome.
as much energy as 30-year-olds. So I got to tell you that. I mowed a acre of land by hand, a push mower yesterday. So there. So
Still got it.
You kids think you can do it all.
I think you're such a great example of, you went to school at 59 and you studied and then you didn't retire. Look at you. You're the most active person I know.
It's boring to retire.
You're right.
So, well, you have to have a reason for living. And I tell everybody this. When my mother was dying, she only had a few days more to live. And the doctor told her that there was no way to save her. And she was laying in the bed in the hospital. And she looked up and the doctor was standing next to me. And she said, okay, she said, she was 91. And she said, I'm not useful anymore, because she could barely walk. And she said to me, she said, I would like to see the outcome of what you're doing. But I will go to my rest because I'm not useful anymore. And I said to myself, and I turned to look at the doctor for a minute, and he had tears running down his face. And that was my motto after that, why do I do what I do? To be useful. Useful. That brings happiness.
Yeah. You're doing a lot of great, powerful work. I know you just worked on a documentary in Germany, and you were in some documentaries recently, and you're working on your book. Like, it's all very useful, and we're all waiting to see what you do next.
So. Yes, thank you very much. And you too, we're waiting for you. 6 months ago, you were looking to survive. You were looking for the money. You were looking for the...
Finally get this film out over the hump. Like, we need your help.
Yeah,
came out.
And 6 months later, look at this.
Yeah.
And you're only beginning. Yeah. So
we got one more caller. We can take one more caller, okay. Bob. I believe the caller is coming in on StreamYard. Caller, did you want to speak up? You're on with us, StreamYard. You go by RM. You are able to speak right now. Go ahead. Say hello to Barbara. Say hello to Scott.
Hey, Scott.
Hello.
Just wanted to say appreciate the show tonight, the interview. I watched it with my family, my daughter Miranda, and her being a musician. It really was special, your show tonight. And she wanted me to let you know that she's going to accept your invitation of the interview.
Oh, cool.
She's so busy with her music career and everything, but she's excited. She said she'll be reaching back out to you.
Awesome. I know who you are, but do you want to say your name? Because you also have a YouTube channel, don't you?
I know who he is, too.
Yeah. I think Barbara was on your show, wasn't she? Yeah. Anyway, we know who you are. Thank you. And say hi to your daughter. She is an incredibly talented artist. So
Absolutely.
I'm happy to show off her work.
And he's got another daughter that is incredibly talented in a different direction too. So
guess what? We went to Branson with a friend from the UK, Steve. He come over and helped me do my birthday. We got to see Michael Jackson, Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, all those impersonators. It was great. That's one thing I'm thankful to the governing body. We wouldn't have met people like them and people like you guys if it hadn't have been for the silliness that they did that woke us up. But Andrea took her sewing machine with us. I know she's gonna be mad telling that. So that's one of the crafts she's interested in and doing many other things. But when Scott said when he was 20 he could do anything he wanted to, imagine how it is when you're like in your 60s like I am. And you finally say that.
Yeah. Well, you're doing what you want to, and you're happy, right?
It's such a big topic.
I figured out what I want to be when I grow up, though.
I mean, when you're an adult, you can be whatever you want in like 6 months or a couple of years if you just work at it. And the amount of focus you can have as an adult, I mean, it doesn't matter how old you are.
He flies
if you're 80, if you're 80 and you want
flies his own plane. How about that one?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so always got something going and making other people happy. And anyway.
I won't be happy till Barbara goes with me.
He wants me to go with him, but I said, no, I don't want to die in a tin box. He's a great flyer, I'm sure, but I had an experience in a little plane one time, and I said, no more.
That's cool. It's my life dream to be a pilot. I might actually do that one of these days. Go study to be a pilot.
I'd like to hear Rick's story sometime when he has time. He's got a fascinating story when he was a teenager.
Who's that?
Rick Fearon.
Oh, Rick.
Yeah,
I didn't hear that because I was reading, somebody said that they're going to go watch television and they're exiting listening to us. So
I think they're going to go watch this on the television is what they're saying. They're like going to switch over to YouTube on TV.
I didn't get that. I got them. That's a television program.
No.
Well, they can see the link. They can see the link right there on YouTube and on Facebook platforms. So there's a link if you want to see the movie, the documentary, Witness Underground. You can go see it. Hit that link, and you'll be able to watch the movie. So, Scott, thank you very much for coming on. Barbara, thank you as usual. And
you, Rick.
We'll see you in 2 weeks, and keep waving that flag of victory. Both of you. We're proud of you both. Thank you very much, Scott and Barbara. Thank
you.
Appreciate
both of you. Take care.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Well, there you have it. Well, that is Scott and Barbara. And, well, that's quite the program. Watchtower Insider tells all. And, of course, that is Barbara Anderson's program. And Scott was nice enough to come on and talk a little bit about his movie. So get in there and watch it. And we're glad that he could do this. We're glad for all the people doing YouTube, doing documentaries, doing podcasts, as he was saying. It's all making a difference and bringing down the Watchtower. So anyways, we're going to be going to JW World News. That's coming up next right here on the Six Screens Telenetwork. So don't go anywhere. We've got a lot of news to cover tonight. And then after the news tonight, we go to Tennessee once again with our good friend Eric. He's a former Jehovah's Witness, and he's going to be talking about what it's like after leaving the Watchtower and how can you really get some traction and live a normal life as most ex-witnesses do. So he'll be coming on tonight talking about that. So we're looking forward to his program as well. So we're going to end this program here. We're now going to go to our other studio, JW World News. So we'll see you there in about a couple minutes. Thank you very much. So we're going to end this.